All right, well, I don't see Natalie yet, but I think we should get going at 7:04. So this is the Sherborn Advisory Committee meeting for November 1st, 2023. I'll call the meeting to order. I'll pop the I was going to pop the agenda up on the screen. I won't. I'll just read it. It's not that complicated to get approval for the agenda. So we'll start as usual with liaison reports. And then our current items for tonight, our budget guidance. So that's guidance we give to department heads for the non-salary part of their budget. The COLA or cost of living increase for non-union employees for fiscal 25. Then we'll review the draft I circulated of the guidance letter and see if we can, hopefully having made decisions on budget guidance and COLA, converge on text for that letter. And then we'll approve minutes. And I'll just mention, I didn't get my act together soon enough to send these before yesterday. So at least one of those, right, is very, very long. And if people haven't had a chance to read through that, we can always do that at our next meeting. We'll see when we get there. So I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as read or to take any suggested changes.
Want to make a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right, so quick roll call, starting Nora, you're at the top of my screen.
Aye.
Paul.
Aye.
Shelley.
Aye.
Ben.
Aye.
Mike Winters.
Aye.
And Wasim.
Aye.
And I'm I as well, so that gets us there at 7:00 for the agenda. Great, okay. So my one, we'll call it a liaison report. So I circulated that proposed rotation for minute takers. Nora was up tonight and she very kindly agreed to take minutes tonight. Thanks to Paul for kind of getting that set up. That was super helpful. So if anybody has any concerns about that, just let me know. I know stuff's going to happen. There'll be a meeting where somebody's up and you'll have a schedule conflict, and it's no problem to organize trades, but just seemed like if we do that, it'd be easier than starting each meeting with trying to get a volunteer. And this just seemed like a good way to distribute that work more or less equally across members of the committee. So let me know if there's a date that you look at. No, I'm not going to be able to be at that meeting. You can also just let me know, days ahead, because we can easily organize a change. Okay, Wasim, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for organizing this. Quick question: Are these, whoever is taking, are they aligned with whoever is responsible for that budget by any chance? Because that's usually I raise my hand when I have a couple of, let's say, big budgets. I raise my hand because those are budgets I need to write about or whatever it is, right?
Yeah. Okay. So that's an interesting point. So I didn't have that in mind when I put it together. I guess the one place where I did that is when we have our joint meeting with the Dover Warren and the school committees. I was hoping to dragoon Mike Winters into doing that one, since he's he and Paul and I are the school liaison. So that's one where somebody who's already sort of looked over school budgets would be really beneficial. It's really the 3 meetings in January and February for those departments. I'll look at that, and maybe let me look at that, and maybe there's a way to switch that. So say somebody who's a DPW liaison could do the minutes the night that we hear about DPW and town meetings. That's a good suggestion. I like that. Just taking a quick note here. So I'll take a look at that and see if there's some tweaks that might go in the direction Wasim suggested. So what else, either on that or other liaison reports? Everybody good? Okay. So then getting into it, starting then with, let me pop the letter up to start with. Okay, so that should be, and let me just do one of the little screen tweak. All right, here we go. Now I've got it set up so I can see everybody. Okay. So letters laid out here. I wrote a draft that obviously we can change however we all decide that it should change. And there are obviously spots to drop in both in the summary and then in the section on COLA and the further down section. Sorry, having one more screen issue here. And then also in the further down section on actually I got it backwards. COLA and budget guidance for department operational expenses, and then obviously the timeline and the list of liaisons and the list of proposed list of budget meetings. So what we need to do is make a decision about the guidance and about the COLA. I was thinking we could start with the budget guidance. And this is meant again to be, what are the instructions we give to department heads for our expectations of what their non-salary budgets will look like? And Wasim probably knows the most history here. But for many, many, many years, I think that budget guidance has been flat, with the idea of, I think I said this in a prior meeting, but with the idea that if there are new things that a department wants to do, they should be looking for efficiencies and ways to keep that part of the budget flat, with the obvious understanding that there will be circumstances in some departments where that just isn't feasible because of what's happened to costs. So that's kind of been the standard way that we've done it. We could do something different, but let me open that up for discussion if anybody on advisory has thoughts on that. I can say for my part, I'm pretty comfortable with the so-called flat guidance, but that doesn't mean that everybody else necessarily would be. Pen, you want to start?
I do. I think that I think I would prefer to see a flat, if I may put it that way. That, you know, we would like to see no growth in the budget, no bumps. If there's a bump, then they have to accommodate even more than they have been, just as a starting point.
And it sounds like you're bringing together the COLA and the operating expenses rather than, I mean, I was just thinking about, you know, what's our guidance for operating expenses? And for operating expenses, I was thinking flat.
Okay, yeah, yes, I thought we were just discussing the expenses and not the COLA. So that's where I am. Yeah.
Well, okay, so
Flat.
okay, just to clarify, when I was saying flat, I meant I was referring to just operating expenses. Then we'd have a separate conversation about COLA. It sounded like you were saying something a little bit different.
No, when I said bump, you said bump for extraordinary. That was I thought the way we'd done it in the past was flat budget, but if new things came up, that if extraordinary things came up, they needed to be, then there would be room for a bump. That was the bump I was referring to, not the COLA bump.
I see.
And I was arguing for like, what you get is what you get.
Yeah, okay. So the current language, which I think is on the screen, that I had written in as a draft was, you know, with the XX and XX would be, we'd say if we went with the flat would be something like, we asked the parties to present budgets that are that show no growth, and use FY24 operational expenses as the, you know, base for FY25. And then have the language, you know, with specific explanations for essentials whose costs make that guidance inconsistent with providing appropriate level of service. Sounds like, Penn, you aren't quite comfortable with that approach.
Well, I guess the both the practical and the philosophical question is, are we comfortable with how we've been doing things and continuing that? Do we want to, which sort of promotes expansion of the budget, or do we want to try to hold that in or even trim budgets in effect? And that's what I was sort of leaning toward myself, trying to bring things down a bit if possible, by at least starting with not allowing growth in them, sort of kind of period, even though that may seem draconian, it certainly seems better than an actual cut.
Yeah. So I think I think we have to think about what are the right words to write. But here's the concern I would have with literally just saying budgets for operational expenses are meant to be flat. You know, if this would be the case for last year when gasoline, diesel prices shot up. And if for DPW it was absolutely flat budget, it would mean, given how expensive gasoline had gotten, by the time we got to the last snowstorm of the year, not going to plow because we don't have any more money for gas or diesel. So the idea is to get language that gives a little wiggle room for things like that that can be anticipated now, but not to give wiggle room for, hey, wouldn't it be nice if we did, you know, if we did these 3 additional things that, you know, everybody in town thinks would be great. And so I was trying to capture that with these words, but I may not have the right words, and that may not be where you wanted to go. But that would be the concern I would have with literally just saying all budgets are meant to be absolutely flat, because there are things that we can foresee that, and it's going to be very department dependent. I think a lot of departments won't have any trouble doing flat budgets. And Jeremy's going to be working with department heads in December, and my guess is that's where a lot of that will go. But I am guessing, couldn't say where exactly right now because I haven't picked through everything line by line, but guessing there will be some instances like that snowplow example where flat would just mean a significant reduction in services in a way that people might not be very happy with.
Well, maybe we could put in some language with something on the word essential, for either to maintain essential services or unforeseen costs in essential goods and services that the departments need to purchase.
That seems fine to me. Where are others on all of this and how we should manage this?
I had a question, Dan.
Yeah, go
So
ahead, Norm.
is it appropriate? I mean, so I'm just being, I guess, facetious. Flat means cut. Like, at what point do you say, all right, we need to start making budget cuts?
Well, I mean, that's
up. I mean, like it's I feel like facing it right in the.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I mean, one thing is that flat in nominal terms, when inflation is running at somewhere between 3 and 4%, means in inflation adjusted terms, a flat budget actually is a reduction in actual resources, because most things most departments are buying are getting more expensive. In terms of actually trimming things, I think my sense would be that if we can identify places where things are being done that don't seem to us to be essential, then that would be the point to push and say, hey, maybe we don't need to be doing this, or maybe we could be doing less of this. It feels to me, suppose, just to play a hypothetical, suppose we said we want all budgets to fall by 5%. I'm just making up kind of a big number. That would seem like a pretty coarse way to do things, because that would probably mean a lot of things that we and others in town would value would be cut. And there might be other areas where maybe a cut could be more than 5%, because there's stuff being done that doesn't need to be done. So a broad, to me at least, a broad overall cut like that would be a bit of a crude instrument, and might mean, police, fire, roads, whatever, might mean things that people would really care about just aren't going to be done. So, that would be kind of an off the top of my head reaction to that.
Right, but that would be under essential services,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So
But-
flat is taking inflation into consideration from the previous year. Okay,
Yeah, so it would be the way I think that would be interpreted is take FY24 budget numbers and don't increase from those,
Mhm.
which again, with inflation running somewhere between 3 and 4%, would amounts to a reduction in actual resources unless departments are able to either find efficiencies or stop doing some stuff they're doing.
thank you.
Penn, hang on just a second. Let me just check before I come back to you, Penn. Check in with Mike, Paul, Shelley, Wasim. Thoughts, reactions?
I just am curious, since I wasn't on the committee last year, the advice last year, it sounds like, was to maintain the budgets at the numbers they were last year as well. Is
Yep.
that correct?
Yep,
And-
that's right.
Was there much pushback in that? Like, was that well received, and were they able to stay within their budgets?
So I think the guidance, was pretty well received. Deb or Diane might want to jump in. Feel free if you do. I think it was pretty well received. I would say, and partly that's because that has been the standard for a number of years. I
Mhm.
think the challenge last year is that a lot of departments came with additional things that they wanted to do.
Okay,
And advisory agreed with a good number of those, not all, but a good number of them. And it was that process where, the budget overall moved higher. So,
Okay.
that's really, that is a point when we get to these budget sessions in January. That's really a point where it's our job to look pretty carefully at budgets and think about, are there places where there should be reductions, and if departments come with requests for, hey, we want to add a half-time position in order to do these 3 things, maybe the judgment of the committee would be, well, that's great, that would be nice, but it's too much to ask the town to pay for.
okay. Well, maybe within like the guidance, maybe we, kind of on Penn's point about essential things, maybe we can we could find some language, just stress that, I guess, stress that position if we're hoping that we're not going to be presented with a number of items like that would push things up, I guess. I don't know. What I'm trying to say, but in anticipation of that. And I guess what I was also trying to figure out is if last year, if it was well received, and last year the advice from the committee was that there were initiatives that they weren't going to recommend happen during that fiscal year. Are we then anticipating that those things will be presented again for this coming budget year?
So yeah, interesting question. Not sure what's gonna bubble up.
Okay,
That would actually be a really interesting question, right, for everybody as liaisons to the department to check in and see. So maybe we get a
Okay.
little bit of advance notice of things that might be bubbling up.
okay,
But the language last year, it was not that different than what I put in the draft, but the sort of
Sure.
language that, Penn suggested is just, I think, a little bit stronger
yeah.
than what I had in the draft. Deb, you unmuted. Did you want to offer a perspective?
No, you just had to ask, how it was perceived by department heads and stuff like that. I think because we have been doing this for such a long time, the expectation is pretty much to level fund. So it really wasn't a surprise, and everybody, tried to do their best. when you're kind of looking for wording, on how to do it. My thought was to try to say, if you know, and this goes into the nitty gritty a little bit, if one line item budget is going to be over, please see if you can reduce another line item to offset that. Rather, you know what I mean? Because the way it's worded right now is request with specific explanations for essentials whose higher cost. Well, so let's say gas is going to go higher. Well, maybe in a different department, they can lower in a different line item, they can lower it. That might be more meaningful to a department head.
Yeah, okay, okay. I'm seeing some nods around the Hollywood Squares screen. Thanks, Deb. That's very helpful. Wasim, Mike, Paul, thoughts on where we go?
I think I'm in support of level funding as well. So, that's what we've done for, I think, the 5 years so far. So,
Okay. And are you okay with seeing with the kind of language that we've been talking about?
so I do like definitely Penn's idea about essential. And Deb, thank you for mentioning this. That definitely makes sense. Yeah.
Okay.
I like both of these. So I don't know, Dan, with your magic, weave everything together.
I've been taking notes.
Nice.
Paul, Mike.
Right, like I'm also supportive of level funding, and also like the idea that Penn mentioned in Deb's more specific guidance as well. So those both make sense to me.
Okay, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everybody. The only thing is, I'm looking at the language, and it does say requests with specific explanations for essentials whose higher cost make advisories and guidance. So I mean, there's already the language of essential. I don't know exactly how different the language would end up being with Penn's suggestion, but yeah,
I mean, Penn suggested, I think, kind of maybe getting essential in twice to emphasize the point with, essential to maintain services in the face of unforeseen costs, for essential goods and department needs as just a way of really emphasizing the point. And then Deb had that interesting suggestion and if not just come with a explanation, but if a line item is going up someplace, probably can't guarantee, but try to see if there could be an offsetting reduction elsewhere. Okay.
yeah, no, I'm in agreement.
Okay, so let's come back. Nora, you had your hand up, and Penn, I think you
just
wanted
a
another.
Quick question, because then it goes down to capital budget. Remember last year it was approved, I was not a voting member, for raising the, from 10,000 to 20 plus, remember that for capital?
Yep, I do.
Is that still gonna be, can you help me understand that a little bit more? Is that gonna be, because that's then a $10,000 extra spread that they don't have to bring it in front of advisory, or?
So my recollection is that it went from 10 to 25.
25, mhm.
Does that sound right? Am I remembering right?
Mhm,
Yeah, okay.
mhm.
So it went from 10 to 25. So things less than 25, I think, would not be coming to capital budget, but would be coming to advisory.
Mhm.
Because if they're things that, say, fire department wants to do, that's $12,000 expense, it's going to be in their budget. They'll have in a budget for a line item for, I don't remember exactly what it'll be called, but something like incidental equipment, whatever. And so it'll be there. So it'll definitely come to advisory.
Right, and so we would hope that would be under essential services.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what it is, and I think we could have a conversation about that.
Okay, I just wanted to bring that up.
Does that all make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Penn, did you want to get in on this again?
Yes, just in the sense of if we're going to, so one question, are we at some point going to look at budget reductions, chipping away at that. It sounds like this is not the place to do it, the time to do it, but could we, one thought, could the board ask the liaisons to approach their departments with the question on their lips of, is there anything you can cut? Or examining it as, is there anything you can cut in what you do?
So,
Just at, sorry, starting.
oh no,
with-
go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, and just sort of, because I'm sure, and it may be that it might be on the advisor's point of view to actually take a step back and look at those departments from the point of view of the town and of the users of those departments, because I'm sure, I'm quite sure, and I'm quite sure that the department heads, sincerely think that everything they do is good and necessary to do what they want to do, and I don't doubt that, but it might be that from an external point of view, that is somebody, one of us imagining ourselves as a user of this particular department or as a member of the town, saying, yes, I can see why you as the department want to provide that or do that or offer that, but from the perspective of the user, for lack of a better term, I'm not sure that's necessary. Can that be trimmed?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in terms of liaisons working with departments, I mean, I think it seems like the sense of the committee is wanting to take a pretty tight view of budgets. And I think communicating that to department heads is a very valuable thing to do. And, given that sounds like that's kind of where we are. And so department heads ought to hear that before, it gets to be time to present a budget. Jeremy, of course, is going to be working with department heads on budgets before we or the select board see budgets. So, good that Jeremy's hearing this conversation. But I think conveying that message to department heads as liaisons, I think is fine. And better that they hear it, from us as liaisons than that they're surprised at a later stage. I guess I come back on the budget trimming. I guess maybe this is from my years in Washington, D.C. and in various different jobs I had, being involved in some of the debates and arguments about the federal budget. My inclination would be to try to identify specific places where budgets should be cut and trimmed, where maybe there's something being done that doesn't need to be done, as compared to for the reason I said before, across the board budget cuts. And, that requires more work from us to be prepared to sort of think those things through. And, here's a particular thing that I have a concern about, and what are the budget implications of that? And, that's really our work for, January and February, and working through things.
Thanks, Dan. That's sort of exactly what I was thinking, as opposed to no cut and burn tonight.
Yeah, I just think the cut and burn is confusing and would end up creating problems that we'd later have to come back and unravel.
Right. Thanks.
All right. So there are two ways we could do this. One way would be to just take a vote on flat guidance, and then I could try to do some editing on screen, or alternatively, we could move on to COLA, and I could, draft later tonight, tomorrow, draft words that I think would capture the essence of the discussion that we had. Fine by me either way, just a question of how much time people want to spend working through stuff. I'm happy to do some editing on screen if people would like to converge on final words.
I
edit
think
on
if you
screen.
can knock it out on the screen, that would be the
Sure.
best.
Okay, that way everybody can see it and there won't be any, hey, what did Dan slip in there? We can all, okay, so let's see. Present budgets, let's go.
Dan, may I get a comment in?
Yes, of course.
Just want to follow up on what Penn said. This was discussed, I believe, maybe last year, maybe 2 years ago, the idea of if you had to trim, say, X number of your budget, where would that be? I don't know if actually we went through with it, requesting that from department heads, but it was discussed at length in our meetings. The idea of, well, let's ask the department heads that if you needed to trim an X number, where would that come from? So that's, maybe Penn kind of follow up on that idea that you had, right?
So Wasim, are you thinking that's something that we ought to do? Or are you just saying it's a possibility and we should talk about it?
I've been worried for the past few years that as the growth of the town has increased, we've done a good job kind of reducing the expense side of things. Well, the whole budget in general relative to the growth, but there's always a lag, right? And so my fear is that lag is coming back to haunt us now, right? And so we're going to have a few years of leaner growth in the denominator and growth in the numerator, right? So that we're going to be faced with higher tax rates essentially for I expect for a few years to come. And so it may not be a bad idea to start thinking now so that we are not in a emergency mode next year or the year after, right? When you have time to think and plan about what cuts can be made, it's better than to have to make those cuts right now, right? So I am probably in favor. Yeah, this is a lengthy answer, but I am in favor of maybe starting to think about that now. Yes.
Okay. Other thoughts on that?
If I can just make a comment.
Yeah.
Wasim, Our tax rate, because you said tax rate, and maybe Wendy can chime in if she's still here, is really part of what is our budget. It's determined by what our budget is, what our expenses are. That comes first, and that's what the tax becomes. I just like to point that out, right? I mean, our tax rate's going up because our budget has gone up.
No. So you're absolutely right, Nora. But I think what happened in the past few years is that the valuations went up faster. Our budgets were still going up during this period in the past several years, but our valuations were going up faster. And so what happens is you end up with a tax rate that's going down. And sorry, Dan, I know you can articulate this way better than I can, right? So, but that is, the trajectory is going to change, right? And so now, yes, the budgets are going to continue to go up, and inflation is certainly pushing that up, but the growth and the valuations are not necessarily going to grow in the same rate. So you end up with a case where the tax rate goes up.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like, this is Wendy Alassi, assessor. Would you guys like some clarification?
Wendy, go ahead. Sure.
Okay. So I mean, and I'm going to give it to you very simple. You take your overall assessed value and you essentially divide it into the levy. And there's, more more factors that go into that. So as values go higher, your tax rate goes lower. And as values go lower, your tax rate goes higher. So it's a balancing act. However, the amount the tax rate goes down is not a discernible enough amount to reduce your taxes. So I tell everybody, and it's like this in every community, your taxes are always going to increase. There's Proposition 2.5. Your taxes are generally not going to go down, unless, God forbid, something catastrophic happened to your home or anything, something like that. But it's a simple values go up, rate goes down, values go down, rate goes up. So it looks good that we're not the highest rate, but we're still paying in tax dollars.
And yeah, thanks, Wendy. And kind of following on that and picking up on Nora's point, as mentioned in the setup of this draft, in FY 23, right, tax rates went down a lot because valuations went up a lot, but tax bills still went up because, as Nora said, the budget went up. And so there was an increase in spending, and that increase in spending needed to be paid for by all the residents in town. And so even though the tax rate was lower, when that got multiplied by the higher assessments, overall tax bills went up, whatever it was, 6.5% in FY 23. So, it's the tax rate is complicated, but tax bills are really primarily a function of how much spending the town is doing. Nora, you're nodding that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. If our budget wasn't 32 million, it was 22 million, it would go down. Not that I'm suggesting cutting the budget by 10 million.
No, right, exactly. If the budget was half of what it was, your taxes would be half of what they were, right?
Yeah, and Wendy, did I say that all in a way that made sense?
I hope so. I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, you're good. You're good. You're good.
Okay.
I just want you to keep me on track.
Yep, you're on track, Dan. Thank you.
Okay. So, all right. So let's do two things. Let's focus on words in here for a minute. Give me just a second as to play with words, and you can watch them as they go. And then let's circle back and talk about Wasim's, the issue Wasim raised about if cuts were to be made, where would department heads look to be doing that? So let's see. Let me just work on this here for a second. All right, so how am I doing? Let me just read this over one more time and see if I garbled it or not. Okay, Penn, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just had a question on the budgets. So when, just so I understand, so when the departments gave their budgets and then they had extraordinary items that they were given a bump up from flat, or those were added from flat, right? So
So
my
diesel fuel, right? It's good
Right.
example of that, right?
And so my question is, does the budget we're starting with this year as flat include the prior year plus including those bumps, or prior year before those extraordinary bumps?
The way this is written, it would be based on the FY24 numbers, so including those bumps. So again, I think one of our tasks would be to say, well, if energy prices had come down a lot, then maybe that line item for energy doesn't need to be as high as it was last year. And then but I think I see exactly where you're going with this. I think the challenge would be, how we could now identify which were the areas with extraordinary bumps, and which budgets would we go back and say, well, these 18 line items had that. I think would be a little challenging to do. It'd be challenging to do before we're actually looking at a full set of budget numbers for last year, for 23, 24, and 25. And then you can see, what was the average? What was the number last year? Hey, there was a big bump up last year. So at this stage of providing guidance, now there might be some language we could include, but I don't really know without actually all of us looking at all of those budget numbers, that we could, like tonight, identify here are the 18 spots where we think that's an issue.
Was the 24 budget up was the 24 budget up from the 23 budget?
It was by a decent amount. Remember, inflation was running at whatever 8 or 9%. So I don't have the exact number, but it was probably up 6% or something.
Okay,
So,
because
it was up by a decent amount. Maybe not that
Okay,
much
'cause
relative to inflation, but just as a raw number by a decent amount.
one option would be could we go with an average of the 23 and 24 budgets as a starting point? So 23.5 or something.
So I guess, yeah, I guess I'd resist that a little bit for the reason I said before, because I think that would amount. So I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but let's say the budget went up by 6% in 24. That would amount, if we did an average, that would amount to an across the board 3% cut. Because we, relative to the 24 budget, because we'd be going halfway back to 23. And for all the reasons I said before, at least I would be a bit uncomfortable with that.
Okay, I think that makes really good sense. And I guess I would, if this isn't drifting off, I think if we do, because the idea that every increase gets built into for the future is a troubling one.
Right.
I think maybe what we should do is, as we talked about earlier, when we look to advise the departments, maybe even be even more proactive than Wasim talked about, and instead of simply saying, are there places you can cut, ask that question, but take a look at it ourselves. Because to make up a hypothetical, if Sherborn had an ice cream stand that was open 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, and had 25 flavors, and we said, is there anything you could cut? And they would say, no, that all our flavors are popular, and we're kind of busy most of the time. We might actually look at it and say, yeah, but what if you offered 12 flavors and we're open 10 hours a week or 10 hours a day?
Yeah.
And it's those are things that quite legitimately might not occur from within a given department, but might occur from an outside perspective.
Yeah. And it occurs to me as you were saying that again, I think that's an interesting role that liaisons could play, because right, liaisons presumably will be focusing a bit more on the budget numbers for the departments where they're talking to people, to department heads, and would be a natural conversation with, were there any items in last year's budget that were extraordinary increases where, like, say energy costs. Again, I don't have numbers in front of me, but some item whose costs went up a lot year. Well, maybe with maybe that item has come down, and how are you building that into the budget? And if one line item like that comes down by $40,000, if the overall budget's flat, then that $40,000 got distributed somewhere else. And those are all good questions to ask and things that I think we would want to be thinking about.
Thank you.
So I put one set of words up here on the screen. Editing on the fly is always tricky. But take a look and offer any suggestions that you think would make this better, stronger, clearer. Paul, go ahead.
Right, so I have one suggestion. In like the very last phrase, and to consider. I was thinking, and to consider offsetting decreases in other line items.
That's
saying
better.
That, meaning, yeah, to consider offsetting decreases in other line items. Meaning, it's not necessarily a 1-for-1, but just right.
Yep, I think that is better than what I had.
Right. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. What else? What else should we tweak or change?
Is this, Dan, is this the area where it may be appropriate to ask, like, to potentially encourage department heads to examine the budgets in light of all the rising costs? With the idea that they would seek to identify possible areas for future reduction. I don't know, maybe this isn't the time to do that. Maybe that's more of a conversation. I'm just.
Well, so that's interesting. So we could, we certainly could add a sentence that did that. I'd be interested, Jeremy, if you'd be willing to chime in, since you're going to be guiding the first part of this process with department heads. Any thoughts you had on adding Shelley's sentence here, or if there's another way that you think might be preferable to manage that and communicate that to department heads?
I mean, even if it's we would rather do it verbally at this point. I don't know, but for it. If the goal is the future, it's like they're thinking about that, and we can focus again on the fact that we'd like to keep the budgets flat, and that we've already identified that costs are rising.
Jeremy, do you want to offer anything here?
I think it's worth noting in your guidance what your thoughts are, and certainly, we'll be, when we meet with the departments. I think some of the most meaningful cost efficiencies are organizational based, not just small incremental changes of let's not purchase this one particular item, but more in an organizational sense. And I think that's where I hope the reviews of the budgets and sitting down with the budget makers and the department heads, Deb and myself and Diane, will help to identify some of those organizational type changes. There's some that we've already identified that you'll see when the budgets are submitted, but I think those conversations can be the most fruitful as far as finding really meaningful cost change.
All right. Thanks, Jeremy.
And there's, one of the biggest budget drivers that you'll see, we did have alerted the select board to, but the health insurance costs for employees right now were forecast to go up about 8%. So, that is going to be a budget driver, that we certainly look for some guidance from the advisory and the select board on how to approach.
Thanks. And I think in terms of organizational change, some of this, I'm not as close to specifics as I think Jeremy is, but if there are departments that have had, say, an open position for a long time, maybe there's some combining of positions and things that could be done that would have the same level of support, but at a lower budget cost, or again, as Jeremy mentioned on the insurance piece, that's always a complicated issue, but certainly that's going to be a big deal, and we will want to think about how best to manage that. So I added a sentence that Shelley, I was trying to get at what you suggested.
This would be great, like when we're having the conversations with them and hearing them out and reviewing the budgets. I think it's good to put it in there so that it's in their mind already that this is something we're going to want to discuss, and also just informing the budget just reiterates the desire to. So yeah, I think it's, I do think that language looks good. And then my only other thought was just, is there a way, maybe kind of dovetailing off what Penn was saying about these bumps and how they basically grow the budget. They just are growing the budgets if they're approved for these essential items that are increasing. Is there a way, and I don't know if there is, but is there a way that we can, I guess if it's a line item that's already there, like, is there a way we can asterisk it or do something that says this item will be reviewed on an annual basis to determine whether or not this increased amount, whatever it is something that should be at that amount going forward? Do you know what I mean? So that instead of like us trying to figure out, well, what were those 18 line items that added up to this amount of increase in the overall budget, we have a way that it's easy to just pick them out of those budgets because we've like asterisked them or some other way of identifying them in the future. And also just letting people know that that those particular items, because they were extraordinary expenses, will definitely be under review for whether they should stay at that amount or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure. You might have a suggestion. I'm not exactly sure how that would translate into words in this letter. But
maybe
I think
maybe it's not in this letter. Maybe that's more for down the road. It's just a thought I had. And
I was going to say, though, one way that I think we'll be able to do some of that is I think when we get budget information presented, I think it's going to show budgets for recent years and something like a 3 or 5 year trend. Deb can fill in exactly how that goes. And so then it's pretty easy to see, here's an item that's way above trend, below trend. Hey, in FY24, this was way above trend. And so I think that's kind of the analytic tool that's something like the asterisks that you were suggesting. Deb, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, you're right, Dan. So what you'll get is like a spreadsheet, and we'll have a 3-year history. So you'll see FY 21, 22, 23, and then a 3-year average, and then what the FY 24 budget is. So you'll be able to compare what the budget is compared to what happened in FY 23. And then there's also that average column that kind of gives you an idea of, was it just a blip or is this a continuing, situation where the price, that line item is going higher and higher every single time. So the information is on each department budget request.
Thank you. That's helpful.
So what else on words in this paragraph? Everybody we can vote in a second, but just wanted to, before we actually vote on these words, just wanted to give everybody one more chance to suggest any changes. All right, so let me propose then that I'd entertain a motion to approve the language in this paragraph on departmental operational expenses, with the implicit, with the budget guidance that's implicit there, which is the flat budget guidance with the additional words that we added. Anybody up for
moved.
making that?
So moved. I make that motion.
Great, thanks, Paul.
Second.
Second? Okay, so let's do
Second.
it. Thanks, Penn. So let's do a quick vote. Wasim,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Penn,
Aye.
Shelley,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Nora,
Aye.
and I am I as well. Okay, so that gets us to 7-0 on budget guidance. Okay, so let's move on to COLA discussion. So what I suggest we do is talk about COLA, see if we can converge on a number, and if there's any language that needs to change in the paragraphs on COLA, and then we'll just we can, if we do that, we can vote on that, and then we can just pop it open for any other language change elsewhere in the document, and then just vote to approve the overall document. So on COLA, I wanted to share, I'm going to take this one away for just a second, the text away, and I'm going to share that document with wage background, if I can grab that here. And I just wanted to highlight a few things about that. Everybody see that document? Is that showing up?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so just a few quick things. Remember, as per that email, the Social Security COLA, that is the increase in Social Security checks in January, will be 3.2%. Personnel board met yesterday, and they focused on their recommendation to us was a COLA of, let's say, 3 to 3.5, with kind of a focus on that 3.2 number from Social Security. Since their meeting, the latest wage data appeared yesterday, which I put into the document that I sent around. I just wanted to briefly walk people through some of the key numbers, because I think it will provide some useful context for our conversation. So these numbers, right, are in each of the columns, are the yearly increases or the 12-month increases through September of each year. And you can see that for overall, just the wages and salaries for all workers in the US economy, based on this pretty high quality survey that the federal government does, wage increases have been slowing a little bit, actually a little more than maybe this picture would show, because the peak earlier in 2022, the peak wage increase on a year, a 12 months change basis was around 5.5%. So wage increases are slowing for all workers in the economy, just as down at the bottom, the consumer price index or price inflation is slowing, and price inflation slowing more dramatically than wage inflation at this point. But then when we come to state and local government workers, the picture looks a little bit different, and you don't see the deceleration there. So here's what I think is happening here. This 2023 number, which is the wage increase from September of this year to September of last year, includes what happened in state and local governments on July 1 when fiscal years began for most state and local governments. And in Sherborn, we had a 4.5% COLA that went into effect on July 1st of this year. And many other towns and state governments did some similar kinds of things. And that for all state and local government employees led to a 4.8% increase in wages. You can see for some of the sub occupations, the numbers were either lower or higher. If you roll back a year to 2022, the increase in wages for state and local government employees from September of 2022 back to September of 2021 was 4.4%. Sherborn's COLA was 4% at that point when it went into effect on July 1, 2022, and would be reflected in this 4.4% number. So what we've seen is overall wages rising, wage increases, the wage increases picking up, and then wage increases slowing. The state and local government wage increases have lagged behind that. They've now had a pretty sizable step up. And I think the plausible forecast would be that at some point going forward, the rates of wage increase will slow, because it's just not going to be the case that the overall private sector wages increases are slowing and state and local government, wage increases would continue to go up. So just as overall wage increases have been slowing, price inflation has been slowing, I think most forecasters would expect that after the step up in the last couple of years, that the rate of increase in state and local government wage increases would be slowing. So our challenge is to figure out going forward, what's a sensible number that balances, right, the hard work of the group of employees who are not covered by collective bargaining agreements, the non-union employees in town, to, what's a fair reward, and kind of try to keep things, in line with what's happening to wages of state and local government employees more generally, and also be fair to taxpayers of the town and not ask taxpayers to pay more than they need to or should. So that's our challenge. I think for the personnel board, the focal point came to that 3.2 number, 3 to 3.5. Given the Social Security, that's what Social Security increase is going to be. These numbers came out since then, and these numbers, the latest numbers in the last column, were a little higher, I think, than most people were expecting. And so, that's sort of where these data, take us. Okay, so I saw it looked like Deb wanted to speak, Vicky wanted to speak. Vicky, why don't you start and tell us about personnel board, and then I actually want to see if advisory members have any comments, and we'll get Deb in here as well. Vicky, do you want to go ahead?
Okay, sure. Hi, Dan. Just as a quick note, when on your overview of what we had said, does it say 3% or 2.5%? I read it real quick, because most of the towns were that I got to were at 3%. But that's a fiscal year 24 chart that you have, that long one there.
Yeah. Right. So Vicky did this very nice thing of collecting data on what other towns have done. These increases, of course, are for last year.
Right.
Not because every town's in the same situation we're in, and trying to figure out what to do for fiscal 25. And Vicky, right, also some of these towns are going to have steps, merit pay,
right, that was
other
the other
things
thing
that we don't have. So
exactly, that was the other thing.
Yeah, so total compensation in many of these towns, many of these towns would have gone up more than what's reflected in the numbers
right
here.
Actually, Diane Moore's got me that information because she had seen it before at the MMA group, but want to give Diane some credit there, because she's really good about following through with things and finding things for me. But in terms of what you had said about the merit I think that's important. We went through the longevity and had that approved last year. And I think a lot of towns, and I can do some homework, it won't happen overnight, but I think a lot of towns are considering merit or have merit, but at this point, we just have to look at, our group of people. The employees worked very hard. The longevity was a great piece for them last year. I think going forward, it would behoove us to look at the possibility of having merit pay, and personnel will probably work on that in the year coming forward. But right now, we gave advisory a point, a half a point there for some room to work with. And, at this point, what you said, Dan, I probably would go more towards the higher end of the 3%, 3 to 5% than the lower end.
That is something like 3.5 as compared to like the 3.2.
Yeah, especially with what you just said.
Okay, thanks, Vicky. That's very
But that's
helpful.
just me. That's just me. Well, the
Yeah, I
board.
understand. That's not
Right.
the personnel board because
Right.
right.
Okay.
Understood.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Deb, did you have any additional context or background to provide before we start talking amongst advisory?
Not really, just basically a question. When you go back to that screen that you just had up previously with the different percentages.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one right there. If you were to put a line item in there for Sherborn, what their 2021 number would be, is that like a 12-month average of what their increase was? Am I reading the chart correctly?
You mean like the 2.4% number?
So yes, let's say,
Yeah.
so I just wanted to clarify that in 2021, which is 9 months of our fiscal year 21 and 3 months of fiscal year 22, that number for Sherborn would be a flat 2%.
Right.
For 2022, you would have 9 months of a 2% increase plus 3 months of a 4% increase. So that number would be 2.5%. And in 2023, you would have 9 months of a 4% increase and 3 months of a 4.5% increase for a 4.13% increase. So when you have the blurb on the bottom that says 4% for Sherborn, 4.5% for Sherborn, it's not really reflective of that whole current year. And when you start at 2021 at 2%, we're way behind the flow. And I just wanted to make note of that. So if somebody says, oh, geez, they got 4.5%, that's kind of right on target.
So
it's not really. We're still playing catch up.
So Deb, I think I'd push back on that just a little bit, because the numbers here are not calendar year numbers. So the 2021 number, it's not a calendar year number. It's not the average for the 4 quarters of 2021. It's September to September number, which is the closest you can get in these numbers to sort of after there's an increase,
right.
What do you get?
And that's what I did as well. So for 2023, you have 9 months from October of 21 through June of 2022 at the 2%.
Right.
And then from June through September, you have the 4%.
The challenge, of course, is that in Sherborn, right, the wages are flat for a year and then they step up. And then they're flat for a year and they step up. So I'm thinking of the 4% step up, the 4.5% step up is kind of the step up. And I'm trying to extract numbers here that as best as possible reflect that step up. I guess I could have tried to do this on a fiscal year basis, but that would have created some other complications.
What I tried to do was take it off the fiscal year basis and make it the 12-month basis based on an average. So when I read this, I think I see 4%. So
But-
again, you
Yeah.
know, it's neither here nor there. I think
Yeah.
you
yeah,
understand what I'm saying is
Yeah.
we're coming into 2021 not at those 4% numbers, not at those 5% numbers. We're coming in at a 2% number. And so
Yeah.
even if that changes 4.5,
Yeah.
we're still way
Yeah.
behind
Yeah.
where
So,
the starting point is lower than what it is.
so,
That's
so,
my
so the way I would interpret these numbers is right in that 2021. So from, fiscal year 20 into fiscal year 21, the increase was 2% because that was the COLA, and that's
Correct.
less than the 2.4.
Yes.
And then, again, in 2022, the 4 was less than the 4.4. In 2023, the 4.5 was less than the 4.8. And so that's the way I was thinking about how to do the comparison. So
Yeah, it's neither here nor there. I guess you understand my point. It's
yeah, I
like
do. And
we're
I guess
we're starting behind the 8 ball. So, and if you look at, so whatever.
Yeah. And again, I think depending on job category, if you drop down and look at the line for management professional and related, those numbers have been increasing more slowly. If you look on the other hand at office and admin support, those numbers have been increasing faster. And, we're not really differentiating there with,
Right.
everybody's getting the same thing.
Correct.
So, for different people in different job categories, that may not really well
Completely
line up
understand.
with these numbers.
I completely understand.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks, Deb. All right. So back to advisory. So Penn, you've got your hand up. You want to start?
Well, I have a couple of questions. So one, what was the amount on the longevity? Could you go through that very quickly for me? Because I'm not familiar with that. The other thing is I remember, do I remember correctly, I tried to find the information. I couldn't put my hands on it. And I may be comparing apples to oranges, I know, given the way other towns compensate people. But if I remember correctly, the last 2 years, we were ahead of the average both years on our COLA increases.
Relative ahead relative to what?
Other towns. If I understood what I read correctly and remember it correctly. I remember in anticipation of this meeting, I was looking sort of, I couldn't put my hands on it today, but I was saying, what have we done in the past relative to other towns? And it appeared that for the last 2 years, our COLA bumps were higher. Maybe I shouldn't use the word bump again. Our COLA increases were higher than they were in other towns. So I didn't know if that had sort of raised our base a bit on that even relative to other towns. And then going back, I'm not sure. I don't know what the longevity pay increases are, so I don't know how to factor in my head those relative to COLA increases. So two separate questions. Sorry.
Yeah. So one maybe in a minute, Vicky can jump in and say something about the longevity pay, but let me just offer a comment on the other. At the bottom of this document, there was the data that Diane and Vicky put together on COLAs in other towns for FY24. And I think if one just averages those, it would look like something around maybe 2.5 or a bit higher. And you'd say, oh, well, we did 4.5. We were way higher than what other towns did. But I think that's not quite the right comparison. And the right comparison is actually very hard to do because some of those towns have step increases, merit increases, and a host of other things that mean people's salaries are rising by more than just the cost of living adjustment. And in Sherborn, we do the longevity pay and we do the cost of living adjustment, but that's it. There are no steps, there are no merit pay. There is no, over time you get promoted in your position and your weight, none of that. That happens in a lot of organizations. It does not happen in Sherborn. And so that makes the comparisons harder. And if you come across the document that you were looking at, I'd love to see it, because if somebody's kind of worked that out, that it would be great to see what they came up with. So
Well, I
my,
thought it- sorry.
I was just going to say, so given the difficulty of that comparison, that's the reason that I turned kind of the national data that's, done from a pretty high quality survey that the federal government does, which isn't perfect because New England may be different than the Southwest, and lots of issues. But that was the reason that I turned to these sorts of data. Vicki, do you want to say a little bit about the longevity pay program?
I am just drawing a complete blank. I just,
So
Deb has to help me with this one.
I can also try to fill in from memory, but I'm guessing since I haven't looked at it for a while, either of you might.
Yeah, I know we went through, it was.
I do.
Deb, do you want to pipe
Deb?
in here?
Yeah,
While
it
she's
was.
looking, I'm
Yeah,
sorry, Deb, can
I don't have the information here in front of me, but it was similar to like if somebody was there for 5 years, I believe.
Yeah.
This, they would receive $250 for that following.
That's right.
For that following year. If you were there, the next jump was 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And we went through, and in total for all the town employees, the
was
total
like 10,000.
The total cost to the town was $10,000.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I know that
Yeah.
10,000
So-
number, but I forgot how we got to it. Okay.
Yeah, and that was for, I think it ended up hitting 15 employees.
Yeah.
And so it ranged from $500, and the highest you could get was $1,000. And we came up with those dollar values based on the other unions in town who
Right.
give longevity.
And out of
Thank you.
15 employees, out of how many, again, while you're there, Deb? 15 out of how many?
I think it was probably 15 out of maybe 27.
Okay.
Not
And
half.
by way of
I do-
comparison. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I do want to interject. That large bump last year was due to Social Security increase that was over, was it 8%?
Yeah, that's
that
a
was
good
huge-
point. That's a
I mean,
good
that-
point, Vicki. Yeah, because we're focusing on the 3.2 Social Security this year, but last year was 8.7%.
Right.
Yep.
And that's why that was so high, is because everybody looked at that and said, okay, if that's what the federal government is doing, from trying to play catch up, which to Deb's point, started a low number, and then all of a sudden you're in the midst of all this and you have to play catch up. That's what they did. And then they're way back down again this year. So, I think that's got to be taken into consideration as well. I really don't think that a number between 3.5% is out of line with what's going on today and what all the other numbers are coming up at. So I guess that's my 2 cents. Thanks,
Okay.
Deb. Sorry
Thanks,
about that.
Vicki. And thanks, Deb. I was just going to say, to put the numbers that Deb highlighted into context. So the longevity pay came to about $10,000 for the year. And that longevity pay was approved at town meeting. That wasn't either advisory or select board. Advisory was supportive of it, but it was approved by town meeting. And to put that 10,000 in context, each percentage point of difference in the COLA, as Deb calculated, and I think got mentioned at a prior meeting, adds up to about $27,000. So if one went from a 3% to a 4% COLA, that would be roughly a $27,000 change in the town's budget. All right, so others on advisory with ideas about where this should go. Wasim.
Not my opinion yet, but I just wanted to respond on the longevity and so it was an award of years of service between 5 and 9. It was $500 between 10 and 14 years. It was $650, and it goes up. And if you're 30 plus, then it's $1,300. Just wanted to provide that context.
Thanks. Glad you could find the numbers. So others on advisory with thoughts on this? I'm happy to offer an opinion, but I wanted to give other people a shot first.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to, I think that this was answered. I think Deb may have answered this. The number of non-union employees that were that are impacted by this is 15, is that right?
It was 15 that were affected that got longevity pay
Oh, 15
Yeah.
of 27, so
out
it's
of a
20
total of about
It's-
27, right?
Yeah, it's
we have
about 20.
27 non-union, and these are full-time positions, is that right?
They're not all full-time positions. They vary. You know, there's, it varies anywhere from 20 hours to 40 hours. So
Okay.
yeah, it does vary.
Okay. Okay.
All right, so I will, since someone else is jumping in, I'll lay out my thinking, which people can then react to, and you can all tell me I'm crazy, and we can go somewhere else. So I had been, prior to these latest, the latest wage numbers coming out, I had been pretty much where the personnel board was, with thinking that the Social Security COLA provided a kind of a reasonable benchmark and was more in line with where I thought these wage numbers were going to land. But it turns out with yesterday's wage data, in a lot of cities and towns and states, there was a pretty sizable jump in pay. And so it pushed me up, you know, kind of along the lines Vicky was saying, sort of the high end of that range of say 3.5, something around there. So that was my thinking. I'm quite open and prepared to be persuaded that there's either a higher or lower number than that would be more sensible. Pen, you want to go ahead?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, I realize in looking at this, we need to juggle a bunch of things and tick a number of boxes. And I guess I would say, I would come down come down on sticking with the Social Security number 3.2. Without going into probably trying to balance things, but also because it's a number we can point to as sort of that has some, for lack of a better term, external validation. And we say, okay, look, the federal government, which, as you say, does some robust number crunching, says this is what they're bumping Social Security up. To me, that seems like a reasonable benchmark, and also, one that's easily explained. Should somebody say, what is it? What was the advisory thinking on this?
Okay, thanks. Other thoughts? Wasim, go ahead, please.
Quick question, please. Are these numbers, do they include the sorry if I'm using the wrong word here, but the total cost of the state and local, or are these the wages? So in other words, do they include healthcare for these workers?
This is just wages and salaries. It does not include healthcare or other benefits, because that's the category that seemed most comparable to what we're doing with the COLA, right? The healthcare thing is going to be a separate discussion. This survey does have data on total compensation, including benefits, and there's a whole separate set of tables on benefits. But I pulled the numbers that were just wages and salaries.
I see. Okay, thank you. So maybe since I have the mic, I'll just offer an opinion here, and I would say that maybe in response to what you said, Ben, I would agree with you, except for the healthcare part. Or no, actually, maybe not. I'm sorry. Strike what I said. I do believe that, yes, the numbers are for state and local government seem to lag the rest of the kind of the civilian, let's say. So there is a lag, and we are going to see that drop. But I do believe that at this point, I am leaning also towards the higher end of the range.
And
So
that higher end, Wasim, in your mind being like the 3.5 or something different than
the
that?
3.5, yes.
Okay, okay. Others?
I
Mike,
just
go ahead, Nora.
didn't have my hand raised, sorry. I'm just curious if Deb has the numbers in front of her, what the total cost is, right? What the total salary of the 27 non-union, altogether, and then really what that number is, the actual number.
I guess I could work backwards because I do know that the increase, like a 1% increase is going to be $27,000. So I guess it would be, if you work backwards, that's the total increase, the total salary dollar amount. But I don't have it here in front of me.
Not including the approximately $10,000 of the.
That does not include the longevity.
Mike, if you're willing, I was gonna come to you since this kind of discussion comes a little close to things that you do in your day job.
Yeah, I'm definitely on the 3.5% bandwagon. I think if we're at, or certainly below, but if we're at the Social Security increase, I think some of the employees would say, well, it should be higher. I get that Social Security, it's something to point to, but it feels like it should be something to point to and then just round up a little bit. I think that's I'm just picturing how it would be received by the employees. So
Okay, thanks. And I would note that the Social Security is based on how much prices of basically the consumer price index. So prices of stuff that people buy went up. Whereas, last year, that was the giant number that got mentioned. The pattern of wages can be different. The pattern of wage changes can be different than the pattern of price changes. And now we're in a situation, if you look down the last column of this table, where wage changes are currently running faster than price inflation. It was flipped last year where wage inflation was running below price inflation, with consumer price index numbers at the bottom being much higher than the wage increase numbers. And then this year it's flipped with, for the nation as a whole, the wage numbers being higher than the price numbers. And the CPI, the Social Security COLA, it's a complicated formula, but it's most closely related to the numbers at the bottom on the consumer price index. So other views. Paul, Shelley, Nora, did you toss out a number or a point that you'd be most comfortable with?
I didn't yet, but if we're talking about, it seems like everybody's so far has been landing on the 3.5%, which is really.
Penn, of course, was suggesting the 3.2.
The 3.2, okay, with the exception of Penn. I'm just doing the math on this, like just in terms of what is the implication of that increase, and it's coming at around 8,100 is the increase basically if we're going from 3.2 to 3.5. Is that right? If it's 27,000 per percentage point, it's only like a third.
Yeah,
third.
that sounds about right.
I mean, it doesn't seem unreasonable when it presents like a more generous view of the contribution that is made by these employees. So I'm inclined to support the 3.5%.
Paul, Nora?
When I look at the numbers.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Shelley.
I'm in the same place too. So I'm in favor of supporting the 3.5%. Like the the replacement costs, so if like employees leaving because of kind of unhappiness would probably dwarf this cost, right? In terms of recruiting and onboarding and so on. So I think being a little bit generous at the 3.5% seems reasonable, both in terms of recognition as well as balancing this against, having to find a replacement employee.
Thanks, Paul. Nora, what are you thinking?
It is difficult for me because I'm an independent contractor.
You don't get a COLA. Ever. Right.
Never, ever. So
Once you start getting Social Security.
will it be there? I don't know. So
Dan, remember,
I'm sorry, say that again, Penn.
I said, that's 30 or 40 years off for Nora.
yes, thank you,
so-
Penn. Yeah. It doesn't even go on my radar. So I'm curious too how many open positions there are. I feel like it's almost like a bigger issue. I'd like always to get really down into the numbers. And so what's the difference and what, to be the devil's advocate and don't anybody get like, what's I know Paul just said to keep people happy, employees happy. I'm all about that. I don't know. I mean, I would defer to the majority of the 3.5. And I don't know, it's just a difficult thing for me to, in a sense, wrap my head around the constant increases. Like what happens if there's deflation or recession? Does that go down? Or does it stay flat? Does it ever go zero?
So I don't know the long history. I know that COLA or the salary increases were 2% for a bunch of years. I know there was at least 1 year, 6 or 7 years ago when, somebody happened to mention this, that it was 1%, but I don't know the whole history. Though my guess is,
I don't mean to be, I'm just saying. It's just,
my guess is that the COLA never goes negative would be my guess, that, it hasn't ever been, the town said, we're cutting everybody's salary 2%, because there's a recession. My guess is if that kind of thing were going to happen, it would be that somebody leaves, and when a new person is hired, there's a reassessment of what the salary would be, and maybe that, in a recessionary period, somebody would come in at a lower salary. But I'm guessing it's unlikely that the town ever actually cut somebody's salary.
and I'm not trying to be contrary.
Yeah, no, yeah.
I'm just thinking, from sometimes a taxpayer view. That's all.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's an important perspective, because that's the flip side, because whatever is done here is paid for by taxpayers. That's where the money's coming from. So I see Vicky and Deb have hands up, so I was going to pick up quick comments from them, and then Penn, since I think you are a little bit of the outlier, I wanted to give you another chance to come back on this if you wish to. But Vicky, let's go to you and then to Deb.
I just have a couple comments. One is, remember, this group has no union. And so the representation that's made for them is none, except for, is none. The second thing is, when we had COVID, and I hate to keep bringing this up, everybody in that town hall, they're the ones that kept this town running, especially when we didn't have a town administrator. And that, whether everybody realizes or not, was huge. So in perspective, I know it seems like we have to number crunch, but I also feel like it's not a huge number of people that we're talking about. So it's also the number of people we're talking about are just, they work hard for the town, and everybody, you can tell by the longevity. They stay there, they know what they're doing, and sure, the cost of replacement would be pretty high. And the institutional knowledge that all these people have is worth a lot more than the 3.5% we're talking about. So I just think we need to think
Thank you,
bigger.
Vicky.
Yeah.
That
So,
helps. I'd just like to have that be brought up in the discussion. So thank you.
okay,
Yeah,
you're
okay.
welcome.
Thanks, Vicky. Thanks, Nora. Deb, quick word.
Yeah, I just wanted to answer Nora's question. There have been years when we have gotten no COLA increase at all. I mean, I've been with the town for 16 years now, and I can remember 2, if not 3 years where there was a 0% COLA increase.
Okay.
So that's kind of what happened during recession. And I had
Okay.
I had just one other real quick point, Dan, is
Yeah.
as mentioned earlier, the health insurance rates are going up by 7 to 8% this year. That's what our Maya representative is telling us. So for somebody who pays for family health insurance, they're going to have a hit of 700, an addition, if everything stays the same, an additional $730 cost next year. So at a 3.5% increase, that first $21,000 that they make, they're not going to have any increase whatsoever, because that's just going to pay for insurance cost.
Yeah, I mean, plenty of things, plenty of things are gonna get more expensive, and that's.
Yeah, I mean, well, we know that insurance is one of the
Yeah.
big ones, and that
Yep.
comes right out of your paycheck.
Yep. Yeah, thanks, Deb.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Vicky.
Okay, Penn, did you want to, yeah, I think you're kind of the outlier at the 3.2 as compared to the 3.5. Did you want to have one shot to try to persuade others?
No, I guess I just, yes and no. I sort of, I'm new to this, but what I see is we're in kind of a weird position, because in one sense, we're kind of, particularly with these sort of employees, a bit of management. But I also see that we are, I'm aware that we are really the representatives of the taxpayers. So that's kind of why I come at this with, sort of a sharp pencil, and less from a management point of view. I understand Paul's position, and I'm not arguing with the validity of it. But employee retention is, I don't want to say it's somebody else's problem, but it's only a part of what we are. And we are, I think, I don't know what the percentage is, whether it's a majority 100% or just a 50%, but we do represent the taxpayers. And so that's when I try to balance things, which is what we're all doing. That's why I tend to come down. I did in this case on, all right, this is 3.2 is a number that makes sense for me from a balance perspective. So thank you, Dan, but that's sort of.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Penn. So my sense is that the group, Penn's comments notwithstanding, is that the 3.5. So given that, I
Dan,
would
just one question, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Was anyone ever able to put their hands on the COLA percentage from the union contracts?
Yeah, so Deb did some very nice digging and did put some numbers together. But again, so I have her email in front of me. I'll read off a few numbers, and then Deb can jump in with any additional color. Again, the comparisons get a little bit messy because of the different structure of union contracts. So, for example, the police contract had a 2% COLA for fiscal year 24 and 25, which of course sounds much lower than what the town did. But there's an educational stipend of 2.3% of base pay for people who get a certain amount of training. There's overtime that some police officers are getting. And also for people who get additional education, there's a bump in salaries, and there are also shift differentials. So for the police contract, the COLA is just one piece that's contributing to overall changes in compensation. And so overall changes in compensation are higher than that. DPW, I think, contracts up for renewal, so I don't think there is a number for 25 yet. And for the schools, it's again a complicated comparison. the kind of negotiated COLA for 25 was 2.75. But then there's step increases that on numbers that Deb pulled together probably say that that increase for 25 is around 4%. So it's just not a, at least as I read the numbers that Deb so helpfully pulled together, it's just not a super clean comparison. Deb, is there any other color that you would like to add to that?
No, not really. I mean, I think that that's the problem with everything is that it's not like because the town employees, this is their whole increase. When you compare it to like the school, Dawn Vittori at the school was the one who gave me the numbers and she said, well, you know, there's the steps and the lanes and then there's, you know, if they're not at the top of the scale, they get this and they get this. And so it's really difficult to pinpoint. So, you know, and the same thing with the police. You know, there's just a lot of additional stipends and bonuses and things like that that they can get. So.
Thanks, Deb. Vicky, you have your hand up. Was that from before or did you have one last comment?
Sorry, that was from before.
Okay, all right. So from what I'm hearing, the consensus seems to be the 3.5. So if everybody just, I dropped that in. If everyone wants to read over this paragraph and see if it all looks okay, then we can vote on the, if somebody then wants to make a motion to accept the language as written with the 3.5%, we can vote on that and see if indeed the consensus remains there. Any other changes that anybody would see and would suggest? Pen.
Just, so is the current recommendation for the personnel board 3.2%? As it says here?
Yeah, so Vicky can jump in if she wants, but what I heard at the meeting yesterday, and to be fair, I was in the car and listening in on my phone, and I had a lot going on at that particular moment. What I heard was the specific recommendation of 3.2, but all of the discussion around it was a 3 to 3.5% range. So were you thinking that maybe the words should be tweaked? And I would offer that up to Vicky if she thinks that in this.
I think what we did, Dan, is we started at 3.2, but we ended with a range.
Okay. So
just to give the advisory board some leeway.
Yeah, so would it be better than to say personnel board recommended a COLA for FY25 in the 3.0 to 3.5% range?
Yes.
Would that be better?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Fine. Okay. Okay. Thanks for catching that, Pen. What else should change? Get your red pencils out, you know, let's go. So if everybody's good, anybody want to make a 3.5% motion or a motion to approve the language in this paragraph with the 3.5%?
Yeah, motion to approve 3.5% COLA increase for salaried non-contract employees.
Thanks, Wasim. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, so then let's vote. Wasim, let's start with you.
Aye.
And then let's see, Mike.
Aye.
Pen.
No.
Okay, over here.
Sorry, Pen.
Aye.
Okay. Shelley.
I.
Paul.
Aye.
Nora.
Aye.
And I'm I as well, so we're 7-0 there. Okay. Great. Good, really good discussion. Thanks to everybody for that. So then on the guidance letter, any other language, obviously I have to drop in the date. assuming that we converge on language, I'll put tomorrow's date in. Any other things that people saw that ought to change? Could be typos, could be small things, could be a bigger thing. Not the right setup, not the right approach. You know, I tried to kind of some combination of how I think about things and my sense of where people on the committee were. But if I didn't get that right, things can change. Deb, did you see something that we ought to fix?
I would not even fix. I just basically had a question on page 2, on the bottom where it said January to March. Advisory budget review meetings, please check the attached schedule and let your liaison or the chair advisory know of any conflicts.
Yeah.
I didn't know, the process is changing a little bit from previous years where Jeremy and I and Diane are going to be reviewing with the department heads, you know, their
Right.
budget. And I thought that part of that idea was to alleviate the department heads coming to advisory for an evening meeting if they met budget guidance. So do they necessarily need to, I guess the question is, what is the expectation, and do they need to know if there's a conflict if they won't be coming to advisory
Yeah.
meeting?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good question. So here's the way I was thinking about it. I'd welcome Jeremy, welcome Diane, would welcome input, because again, we're doing things a bit differently this year than last year. So, you know, need to figure out exactly how this is going to work. My thought was that, so we have really 3 for budget review, not getting to warrant articles, really have the January 10th, the January 24th, and February 7th meetings when I proposed this set of departments. I think the way this is going to work is, as Deb said, that Deb, Diane, and Jeremy are going to kind of present the budget, highlight places where guidance wasn't met, do some of the other things that we discussed earlier. My expectation, and again, we should talk about this because maybe others had a different idea. My expectation was that department heads probably would be there on the one night that their budget is up, in that there might be questions where Deb, you, Diane, Jeremy might want to be able to have a department head there to answer questions. If that doesn't sound right, then we should maybe offline. This may not be the time and the place to sort that out. We should talk about that and make sure that everybody's on the same page with expectations. So that's what I was thinking, but it sounds like that maybe you and Jeremy and Diana have had conversations of maybe doing that a little bit of a different way, and I'm completely open to talking about that.
Well, yeah, I guess I thought that if there was exceptions, then they would be, you know, at advisory. But if there was no exceptions and they met the guidelines, that they wouldn't have to come.
Okay, so we should talk about that and figure out the best way to manage that. I guess my only concern would be, particularly given the earlier discussion, if an advisory member does get interested in, hey, here's a particular activity or line item in a budget and would like to talk about it, even if the budget does meet guidance, then perhaps it would be helpful if that department head were there. But I don't think that's a thing we need to figure out tonight. I think
Yeah, I guess it was
Jeremy
just,
and I can talk about that more going forward.
yeah, it was just the wording in the guidance letter, you know.
Yeah, okay.
Like getting ahead of ourselves.
Okay, so let's see if
Hey, Dan, if you go back down, I think you need to change a couple while you're down on page 6.
Sure.
Some of the dates, 24. So March 16th, Saturday, the 16th. Just little
yeah.
typos, right?
I'm sorry, what do you see?
Saturday, March 16th, 2024.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yep.
And then Tuesday.
And town meeting. I put
Yeah.
town meeting in last year as well. I'm trying to do time machine stuff here. Okay, good, thanks. Did you see something else as well?
Not from that page, no.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else anybody saw? I was scrolling up to see if we should tweak. uh, let's see. Maybe we can just say, see what think of this. Just say, please check the attached schedule, and Diane, Deb, and Jeremy and I can sort out exactly what the expectations are for department heads. Anything else on the letter?
Do you mind just scrolling down, please, to
Sure.
page 4? I just want to take a screenshot of that.
Oh,
Just-
sure.
Thank you.
And when if we converge on this tonight, as it seems like we're going to, I will send a copy to Jeremy and Diane tomorrow to circulate to department heads, and I will CC, everybody, so everybody will get a copy of it. Everybody good? You guys are easy graders. You're really easy graders. Okay. All right. Well, then I would happily entertain a motion to approve the guidance letter as it has been edited on screen.
So moved.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second,
Okay, and then let's vote. Nora,
aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Shelley,
Aye.
Ken,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Wasim,
Hi.
and I'm I as well. So we're 7-0 on the letter. Okay, so I will proofread it one more time tomorrow. I assume I have everybody's permission to just correct typos. I won't do anything more than correcting a typo, but I'll give it one more read over, and then I will send it on to Jeremy and Diane for distribution to department heads. If I see something dramatically wrong, we'll figure out what to do about that. I'll get back in touch with everybody, but I think we're in good shape. Okay, very good. Thank you. Glad to have that set. All right, so we're almost at the end. Let's talk just for a minute about minutes. Did people have a chance to read through the super long public hearing minutes? So is that something that would be worth approving tonight, or would people, given that I only sent it around yesterday, prefer to save that for our next meeting?
I'd prefer to save it because I haven't had a chance to read
Okay.
it.
All right, then we should save it, because I don't want to rush that forward if people aren't comfortable with it. So let's not do that one. We'll save that. Let me pop up the other two that are much shorter, and maybe we can get those approved unless people see or fix any problems.
Yeah, and since I'm taking minutes, excuse me, what was the date of the town meeting minutes? The date, do you just have the date off the top of your head?
It was actually the public hearing. I might
Oh,
have
the
said
public
it was
hearing.
public hearing. It was September
Okay.
27th.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so going back in time, let me share. These are really exciting. These are minutes from that slightly strange, very brief meeting that we had actually at town meeting. So I will just quickly scroll through these. And I see I need to get rid of that extra line. Anybody see anything we should change here? Anybody with a motion to approve these as on screen?
So
Motion.
moved.
And a second? Great. Okay, thanks. Okay, Nora,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Shelley,
Aye.
Pen,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Wasim,
Aye.
and I'm I as well. So those are good. Approved 7-0 and 1 second. And let me get one other relatively short meeting up here. This is a little more involved. This is, I'll get up here in just a second. This is October 11th. How's that, Wasim?
Sorry, I meant the following sentence. Dan summarized that the past several years, guidance has been flat or no increase for the operating expenses. That's probably where the explaining for the operating.
Yeah,
expenses
okay,
makes
good,
sense.
good, thanks. Is that good?
That's good. But I don't know if now the previous sentence though you changed the intended meaning, the original intended meaning. I don't know. But this you fixed what I wanted, which is the following sentence. So thank you.
I think it kind of says the same thing twice, but I think that's I think that to me at least that's okay, because really it's, you know, that's what the budget guidance is about, and then the COLA is the separate piece down below.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, so we had a motion, made a few changes, so would the person who made that motion want to just redo it with the changes that we just made?
Oh,
I
okay.
move to approve the minutes as edited on the screen.
Perfect, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and let's vote. This is October 11th minutes. Wasim,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Ken,
Aye.
thanks. Shelley,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Nora,
Aye.
and I'm I as well. So 7-0 for October 11th minutes. Okay, that is great. That is everything I had. We will do the September 27th public hearing minutes another time when people have had a little more time to read those, and because that's a long involved thing. And as noted there, Steph Harrison actually did those. She's the clerk to the planning board, and she was persuaded to do minutes for that meeting, which was really, really great, because it'd be very hard for any of us to really be engaged in the meeting and be taking minutes with everything that's going on at that meeting. So that's it for me. Sometime it'd be fun to have after action talk about town meeting, but this isn't the right time for it, but it would be fun to do that sometime. So unless anybody has anything else, I would happily entertain a motion that we adjourn. Jeremy, you just popped up. Did you have a comment to offer up?
No, I was just gonna.
All
say
right,
thank you
all right,
all.
perfect. So again, happily would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion
Second.
to adjourn.
Oh,
Nora, second.
second.
And all right, quick vote. Nora,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Shelley,
Aye.
Ken,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Wasim,
Aye.
and I'm an I as well. So we are adjourned at 9:07. Thanks everybody for a good meeting. Really glad that we could get to closure on the guidance letter. Felt to me like a very good, interesting, and fruitful discussion. And unless something unexpected comes up, we get a little bit of a break on meetings. And so there'll be some behind the scenes stuff that's happening to get things set up for the budget review, but we'll see everybody at our next meeting a little ways down the road. So thanks, everybody. Good night.
Good
Night.
night.
Aye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.